Conference play gets fully underway. LSU taking on Ole Miss. The Cajuns have a rematch of last year's Sun Belt Championship game. And Tulane taking on Tulsa. We got all that and so much more. We're putting all our picks on the table on this Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. Happy Friday to you. Welcome back to another edition of the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. It is a Friday, the weekend. It is upon us. And it also means we got another great week of college football to talk about and to break down. A lot of great matchups. And obviously, we're going to start out strong here. We're going to go with college football first because obviously that's what's going on tomorrow. Then we'll get to Sunday's matchup with the New Orleans Saints and Buffalo Bills. I think you kind of know the direction I'm going to lean with that one. But I need to start off with LSU on the road in Oxford against the Ole Miss Rebels. A matchup that I think has plenty of juice. Talked about it a lot on yesterday's pod about Trinidad Chambliss, what he can bring to the table, and how much of an X factor he's been. Again, his third consecutive start of the season. Again, the guy came from pretty much Division II, a step above JUCO, and usurped the QB1 role. I think it's a really cool story. I'm intrigued to see how he does against a top-tier SEC defense. At the end of the day, I believe LSU is going to be well prepared and going to make Trinidad Chambliss look a lot more human. So I think LSU wins this one, but I think the other key is going to be, in terms of that, is can this LSU run game finally put it together to truly make this a complete game? I think there's no doubt in my mind that LSU's defense is going to show up, that front seven is going to be ready, and I think they're more than willing to see what Trinidad brings to the table in this game. They've seen plenty of film of him. If this were a few weeks ago, if this were instead of the Florida game, it was Ole Miss, if you swap those two around, I'd probably say Ole Miss would have a better chance because you don't have a whole hell of a lot of film on Chambliss at that point in time. Fast forward to today, you have a lot more film, and especially what you saw last week against Tulane. As long as you're able to kind of hold them back in terms of the run game, I think you can kind of take one of his elements away, and that's his speed, because he had some really good speed. There was an option play very early on in the game last week, and I noticed when I was watching back the film is how pretty much the entire defense bit, and he had plenty of room to work with. Now, again, that was Tulane. No knock against them and what they've been able to do so far this season, but I think there's levels to this, and I think there's that the LSU defense is on another level, comparatively speaking. I think obviously you've got Harold Perkins, the Weeks Bros. That front seven is going to be tough to penetrate. And then that's not even counting the new DBU with AJ Halsey kind of leading the way. Again, that defense looks great. I think the run game needs to show up because you need a lot more of that and not just rely on Garrett Nussmeier to lead you to the promised land. You need that balance of run and pass in this contest, especially because I've got a feeling like this is going to be a shootout. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be a lot like the 2023 matchup or the 2024 matchup, but I would not be surprised if both teams are putting up 20 to 30 points in this contest. Can LSU withstand that? They've shown that that's been a bit of a question mark as we start the 2025 season. Again, we're almost done with the month of September at this point. Next week, it'll be October. So this is an opportunity to kind of just show us that this offense is turning the corner, because we talked about a lot this week is the fact that LSU hasn't shown us that outside of the Southeastern game, but that was to be expected. The first 3 weeks of the season, the offense, I wouldn't say outside of the La Tech game, they didn't sleepwalk. They just struggled a little bit. And it feels like they're starting to turn the corner, but I think this would be a real sticking point in the 2025 season with a win. With a loss, it hurts you a ton. You drop down some rankings and you lose a lot of your momentum going into a bye week. A win will absolutely change that perspective. And I know for sure Brian Kelly and crew would love to have a week off after a win just before they get into the meat of the SEC schedule. So I think LSU is going to win this one. If I were to put a score to it, I would put 35-31 being the final. I think it's going to be a very close ball game once again because I believe Lane Kiffin is probably the closest thing for Brian Kelly in conference to be the new Nick Saban. He has just been a thorn in your side ever since he's come over from Ole Miss. He's made that rivalry a lot more competitive. The last 4 times these two teams have played, it's been the home team winning. I think that streak finally ends tomorrow night over in Oxford. And LSU probably will move up in the rankings just a little bit more, which is going to be nice to see as the calendar flips to October. We'll flip it over to the Louisiana Raging Cajuns. They have a Sun Belt Conference Championship rematch from last year, even though technically is it still a rematch? Because of the fact that most of the team from last year that would be returning decided to enter the transfer portal and all follow the head coach at the time over to move him whenever he jumped ship to Southern Miss, which was a crazy thing to have happen, going from the Sun Belt East to the Sun Belt West. But safe to say, he knows what's best for business now. I think the big challenge is, can the Cajuns get it done? Can they manage to get another win throughout the rest of the season? And it's not a knock on what Coach Des has done in his tenure as the head coach of the Vermilion and White. I think it's more of a question that needs an answer because the schedule does not get any easier the rest of the way. And the fact that your offensive line is cooked. Shelton Sampson, who looked better in the game against Eastern Michigan, he's down with a torn ligament in his finger, also had another injury that took him out of the ballgame. You are without 4 of your original starting 5 offensive linemen. There's a ton of question marks that we have when it comes to the Cajuns. And more importantly, can Daniel Beal continue to improve? Because again, the Walker Howard situation put a monkey wrench into the season that I don't think anybody really expected. So with that in mind, we're going to go with Marshall winning a very close one. I think it's going to be more 28-21 final score, just because I'm not necessarily sure that this Cajuns team can do it. It's one of those show me that you can get better after losing the last 2 weeks and the way that you did, where 1 week you got your ass handed to you. It was pretty much a butt whipping from the second toe met leather to kick off the game. Or is it going to be the one where your heart gets ripped out in the final moments because of some questionable play calling? I think the Cajuns lose this one, but it is going to be a very close one. Meanwhile, we'll kind of stick on down into the south part of Louisiana and go to the Tulane Green Wave, looking to bounce back after a tough loss, and they got stomped by the Ole Miss Rebels. Hopefully they can kind of get back into the winning column with a matchup on the road against Tulsa. And Tulsa, don't forget, Tulsa actually wound up being the reason why Mike Gundy exited stage left early, which is also just insane to think about. One of the big highlights of the week leading up to this weekend's contests is the fact that Tulsa wound up beating Oklahoma State 19-12 and inadvertently cost Mike Gundy his job. He'd been there for a long time. And it was funny enough, the day after the iconic rant about a mother of children, you know, come after me, I'm a man, I'm 40, which I am still going to use as a video when I turn 40 years old in 4 years, in 2029. That video will be popping up on social media if we still have social media to post on by that time. Just kidding. But I think Tulane does get the win against Tulsa. Tulsa's a good team, but I feel like we're going to see a better Tulane program this weekend than we did last. Now, who's to say that Tulane's offense hasn't been locked in on when it comes to all these programs because now they have more and more film on them. And what we've seen for the first few weeks is Jake Retzloff being the guy. And he's been Mr. Everything. He's been getting it done through the air, getting it done through the ground. I wonder if Tulsa's noticed that in film and is going to utilize that in this ball game. But I feel like Tulane is going to win this one. I'll go 21-17 for this one. I think the Tulane offense isn't necessarily firing on all cylinders in it, but they're able to do just enough to come away with a nice win in the American. Now we're going to make our way over towards Nicholls State. They're taking on Eastern Kentucky. Again, the Tommy Rybecki era has been a rough start so far. I feel like it's going to be a minute before that program gets built back up to the level that I think that program wants. But I think a win against Eastern Kentucky would be a nice statement to kind of, wonder what is going on with that program and how things are going to go with him at the helm. But at the same time, I think you have to exhibit a ton, and I mean a ton of patience, because it's a lot like, to a lesser level, but it's still factual. When Nick Saban left Alabama, now you've got Rybecki filling the shoes of a longtime head coach in Tim Rebowe. I think Nicholls can win this game, but I'll go Eastern Kentucky because I think Nicholls needs to have the ball bounce a certain way to pull that game off. It will make a move over towards Hammond, America, for Southeastern Louisiana. Going to be hosting UTRGV, UT Rio Grande Valley. And they just had they're a brand new football program, like quite literally. So at the end of the day, I think Southeastern gets this one. They bounce back after a really bad loss to LSU, which was to be expected again. And I believe that we're going to see Southeastern Louisiana handle business and continue to look good. All things considered, they've been a pretty good program in 2025. So Southeastern, I think they win this one by double digits. We'll make a move over to Grambling. Going to be taking on Prairie View A&M. I think Grambling has looked a lot better than maybe the experts thought heading into the season. So I think Grambling handles business against Prairie View A&M. Then you have Southern hosting Jackson State. I think Jackson State wins this one. Southern has a problem, and I'm wondering if they can ever get back up into contention this season. Because right now, it has not looked good. Only one win on the record. They've been MIA for a little bit. Here's hoping they can figure out a way to get things back under control, but I feel like this is going to be a loss. Jackson State is still a good program. So I'm intrigued to see how that game's going to turn out. But Jackson State, I've got to kind of put them pulling off the win. Now we'll wrap up our time in South Louisiana, move over closer to the Texas state border for McNeese. Going to be hitting the road to take on Stephen F. Austin. I've liked what I've seen from the Cowboys. That week 2 matchup really made me realize how good Mr. Strong at quarterback actually is. Now, I think this is going to be a true test of this McNeese program that has looked a lot better under their new returning head coach. The prodigal son is back. The vibes are good, but at the same time, they have lost some tough ball games. I think McNeese can get a win here over Stephen F. Austin and start riding that ship. It's going to be another close ball game. I'd say a 21-14 type game. I don't think it's going to be super high scoring, but it's going to be a fun game, and I think McNeese comes away with the win. Now we'll kind of start moving up towards North Louisiana, slowly but surely, before we get to the New Orleans Saints. UL Monroe taking on Arkansas State in a conference opener. Both of these teams are very much like wild cards. There's not a whole lot known about them off top in terms of a battle between these two teams, whether or not either team's whether or not each team has an edge. Either team has an edge in a sense, because I feel like UL Monroe has shown themselves to be getting better in a lot of different aspects. A couple weeks ago, you had a former Warhawk look dominant against the Cajuns whenever he was playing for Mizzou. Like, he was running up and down that field. So I think UL Monroe is getting a little bit better and is able to find good talent. Keeping them around is a different story, but in the NIL world, it at least makes sense. With that in mind, I got to go with UL Monroe winning here. I don't necessarily think it's going to be as competitive as some of the other games that I've talked about, but I feel like it could be a double-digit win for UL Monroe. Arkansas State's been in a weird state the last few years. They've won some games maybe they weren't necessarily pegged to, but I feel like they've lost a lot of tough ball games over the last few years. It just hasn't been the same since Anderson left as the head coach of Arkansas State a number of years ago. That program about 10 years ago was really fun to watch. Obviously, the coaching carousel ate up a few of those coaches in very short order. In fact, it's kind of crazy to see the arc that Arkansas State has been on. But since COVID, they've kind of dropped off in significant fashion, a lot like what we've seen with the Arkansas Razorbacks over the last decade plus. And we'll wrap up the state of Louisiana in college football. I said high school. Look at me. Is Louisiana Tech on the road against UTEP? La Tech, once again, La Tech is outkicking my coverage for them heading into the season. I said that Sonny Cumbie was pretty much on the watch list of coaches to get fired in the state of Louisiana. Now I'm thinking Sonny Cumbie is building something really cool. Again, last week was a really nice win over former Conference USA mates Southern Miss, aka Marshall of the South. I think they can kind of parlay that into a really nice win over UTEP. The fact that you were able to beat Southeastern Louisiana to start the season, it's tremendous. Then you keep it competitive. You cover the spread against LSU. I think that's something that should be commended and applauded on the mountaintops. Had a really nice game against Southern Miss. I think this is a golden opportunity for this team to continue to escalate and move up in the world, especially in what seems to be a pretty competitive Conference USA. So I think La Tech is going to be making their way back over to Ruston with a pretty nice win, but still no Buckies. More likely than not, that one actually looks like it's going to be done first in Lafayette. And brother, I am all the way here for that kind of bragging rights heading into the 2026 season when La Tech starts to make its way over to the Sun Belt Conference. We'll wrap things up here talking about those New Orleans Saints against the Buffalo Bills. And I'm sure a lot of you are going to say, Clint, why are you talking about this game? I think we all know what the end result is going to be. And I agree. But at the same time, I feel like it's not going to be as bad as you think. At least on paper, it doesn't feel that way. Again, I talked about it earlier in the week. The Bills played Thursday Night Football against the Miami Dolphins, and the Miami Dolphins are absolutely just horrid in a lot of different ways, especially when you see what they've been able to do over the years and kind of fumble the Tua Tagovailoa situation, or should I say, Tua turned the ball over. That said, the Bills, I think they're going to win this game. I feel like there's no doubt in my mind. That said, I will caution you if you've seen some of the spread lines as of late. BetMGM has them at 16.5 points. By the way, not sponsored by any sports book. So I'm just giving you what I'm seeing right here, right now. And the spread is 16.5. I will tell you from back in my olden times, back when I used to talk a lot more about the spreads, putting together some absolutely putrid parlays. And I said it to you a few weeks ago with Louisiana Tech at LSU, that if a game is more than 4 or 5 touchdowns, more likely than not, that team is going to pull off a backdoor cover. The NFL, you're not seeing all that often a boat race where a team's putting up a 50 burger and winning 50-7. So a 16.5 point margin, that's a little over 2 touchdowns. It would surprise a lot of people to say this, especially with how banged up the Saints have been. but I'll throw a hot take in here to wrap up the pod for the week. And that is that the Saints will lose, but if you're a betting man or a betting gal, I'd say put your dollars and cents on New Orleans to cover 16.5 points. I would not be surprised if this is a 14-point game or a 10-point game. It could be a lot more competitive than a lot of people are thinking. People are saying, oh, they're going to lose 70-0. No, I don't think we're going to see that 2 weeks in a row. I feel like the team that we saw last week was demoralized. A lot of stupid penalties. Special teams look putrid. And I think they want to prove a point that, oh, hey, we may be bad, but we're not this god-awful where we're just completely putting it in the tank. They want to let Spencer Rattler give them the best chance to win, which is great to hear, by the way. Because one of the things that I've been worried about as we've started the season, ever since Spencer Rattler was pretty much named the QB1, was how long will he be the QB1? And it feels like Kellen Moore and the coaching staff is becoming more and more in favor of what they've seen from Spencer Rattler. He has gotten not significantly better, but he's on that good trajectory upward to be the guy. And that would be amazing to continue to see that this team is moving upwards and to see that your starting quarterback is making the right move. At the end of the day, that's what I would love to see, is this franchise find a quarterback that is a starting quarterback caliber. You don't need him to be a Super Bowl winning quarterback. You can surround him with a lot of great talent to work with, because I think if you put a starting caliber in the NFL QB and you surround him with good talent, I feel like some cool things could happen. I'm not necessarily sold on Tyler Shough. And I saw some people earlier this week talk about the possibility, if you had the opportunity to get Russell Wilson, would you take him? I'd say there might be some provisions in there. Number one is the Giants have to release him, I think, outright. I'm not trading for him, especially if I'm Mickey Loomis. I'm not giving up draft capital. That said, if he would become available in free agency, I would try and figure out a way to get him like the league minimum and have him work with Spencer and Tyler. Even if he doesn't start a single game, I think they would be beneficial to both parties, the Saints and the Saints quarterbacks and Russell Wilson, to impart that knowledge. Because again, Russell Wilson won a Super Bowl. And I don't think it was necessarily all because of him. A lot of it was because of the Legion of Boom, Marshawn Lynch, Beast Mode. That team of that era was too damn good to overlook. The Saints team is far from what we've seen of that Legion of Boom era that Russell Wilson knows. But he knows what it takes to be a Super Bowl winning quarterback. Have him sit with those guys. I would love to see that, but only if you can get him not dirt cheap, but relatively on the cheap for an aging quarterback that is at the end of his rope. But overall, I'm definitely not necessarily a huge fan of doing that, especially if you have to move heaven and earth, because I think he'd want a lot more than what I'd be willing to give him if I were in charge of the New Orleans Saints. But I'm not. I just host a podcast, and that is the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. Appreciate you listening in. Make sure you go check us out on YouTube. Subscribe to us over there. And also, if you haven't yet, hit that little follow button on Spotify or subscribe wherever else you get your podcast. That way you do not miss a single solitary episode. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you on a Monday, recapping everything that happened over the weekend. You've been listening to the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. Peace.